Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first episode ever of The Cupping Table. I am David Paparelli, the co-founder of M-Cultivo, and over the next few weeks, we'll be hearing from some of the best coffee producers in the world. They will be sharing their stories, insights, and outlook on specialty coffee and what makes their coffee so unique. Each one of these producers will be showcasing their coffee at the World of Coffee Dubai on February 10th in this first of its kind Dubai coffee auction run in partnership with the DMCC Coffee Center. My guest today is Willem Boot. Willem has had a 40-year career in the coffee industry, spanning from roasting and farming to consulting and education. He started a specialty coffee roasting company in the Netherlands, was a head judge in the Cup of Excellence, and a senior consultant in international development programs worldwide. Part of his education work has been in establishing the Boot Coffee Campus in San Rafael, California. He's a regular teacher for training and certification programs for the Q program as an accredited instructor, and he helped establish Geisha Village Estate, a 400-hectare estate in Ethiopia. And finally, he has also become an award-winning Geisha farmer in Panama, establishing his own farms, Finca Mula and Finca Sophia, which I'm lucky enough to be drinking Finca Sophia right now. So welcome, Willem. Where are you joining us from today?
Today, I'm from my hometown in California, close to the campus, and I just got back literally last night from a visit to Panama, where the harvest is just starting, and I have some very, very early samples of our farms with me. So this is always an exciting time in the life of a producer when the pickers are coming out and start harvesting the coffees.
Maize, how's the harvest looking so far?
We had an interesting year this year. So our farm La Mula, which is the first farm I started, the first time I tried to become a coffee producer was with La Mula. With La Mula, we see very initial small pickings coming out. And so it's too early to see. La Mula was partially replanted 3 years ago, and we now also see some of the first cherries on those trees. So that's really exciting. Then we have a farm called La Cabra, where the harvest has started. And then in our beautiful farm, Finca Sophia, we have had some very early pickings as well, but the main harvest is still to come and really starts not until March, April of this year.
Well, yeah, absolutely amazing, and I've heard a little bit about your story, Willem. So I'm grateful that you've been willing to share that in the past. But just for our audience who doesn't know, I'd love to hear about your journey from kind of starting a roasting company, I guess, in the Netherlands to becoming a Panamanian coffee farmer. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah. That seemed like a long jump, and it is a long jump in hindsight. When you mentioned how many years I've been working in coffee, wow! Then I feel
I didn't
very
want to
old.
age you.
Then I feel very old, very like a dinosaur. But at the same time, I still feel every day like a kid in a candy box. Like often I feel. Especially when I'm at the farm and coming back from the farm or one of the farms, and I think, wow, we can do this and we can do this. And, every time I feel like it's just getting started. So growing up in the Netherlands, half an hour from east from Amsterdam, the Holland is a major coffee drinking country. I became very early inspired, as well as motivated, as well as trained by my dad, who was a pioneer of the early waves of specialty coffee. He thought that the best way to enjoy coffee was not blended as a single origin, straight from communities, cooperatives, straight from farmers. That's that was in his time when he started his business, his concepts in the 1970s, long time ago. Um, that was his mantra, his approach, and I became very much inspired by that. The very first cups of coffee that I started enjoying were single origin coffees from Kenya, from Guatemala, and then later on from Panama. And working in the Netherlands, I became an economist, but always was very connected, passionately connected with coffee, with roasting, with working in my dad's retail store at a very early age, um, exploring barista work, learning about coffee tasting from my dad, and tasting numerous of coffees with my brother and with the other staff members in our company. So those years, those were my formative years. I knew, in hindsight, I knew at that time that this was not going to be it. I didn't want my career in coffee to be limited to that. I started exploring, because of my economics degree and background, international development very early on, working as a volunteer in places like Mexico and Ethiopia, very much connected with the Coffee Quality Institute as a volunteer. And then there was this epical moments. I'd been a head judge for events like the Cup of Excellence and other coffee competitions. And so I was very in tune with the environment of competitions where you try to select and find the jewels in the rough, right? That's what these competitions do. And in 2004, I had already done as a coffee professional, consultant, trainer. I'd been in charge of and been participated at many coffee tasting events. And in 2004, I was part of the team of judges at the Best of Panama. Panama started its Best of Panama, I believe, in 1998. So this was the 6th or 7th version. And we were all judges were floored. We were just both humbled as well as surprised, as well as elated about this one coffee, which was the first presented Esmeralda Geisha, which in 2004 set the beginning of Geisha, of the phenomenon of Geisha coffee, right? And now we are in Panama in 2004 when world coffee prices were in the gutters. Coffee producers were desperate. And here came a coffee that was just so unequivocally floral and sweet and so exotic, with an Ethiopian-like profile in a place that is like many countries away, 2 continents away. And I was just floored by that experience. And like this feeling started to arise in myself. I had been intrigued by the question, how would it be to be a coffee producer? So the feeling arose in me, this is my time. This is now I have to really try this jump to become from a buyer. I'd been a buyer for my family company for various years, to change from being a buyer and a judge on the other side of the table. Now it's my time. I see myself one day presenting my coffee on the other side of the table as a producer. That was my dream, right? And then with the help of my dear friend and brother in coffee, Graciano Cruz, I obtained land at the Baru volcano in Panama. The first time I visited this land was on top of a mule, and mules are wonderful animals. They just steadily go on, and I got to this land that was completely infested, overgrown with weeds. There have been coffee trees at some point, but the producer abandoned the farm, and then I turned around, sat on this mule, and then I saw this amazing view. I fell in love with the lands. We decided to name the lands, the farm, La Mula. La Mula is the Spanish word for mule. And that was the beginning of La Mula as a concept. Then, of course, the real work started, and we had to plant trees, and we had to develop the land. And I had never done anything like that before, right? So the
Yeah.
closest I got to becoming a producer was having trees in my room as a teenager. And now the real work started. Graciano not only sold me the land, he supplied me the land, but he also planted the farm. The trees had to be carried in 10 at a time by Nobe, Bukle, young indigenous workers. I, of course, was there during the planting. I symbolically planted the very first tree. And now we are in 2006, 2007, when we started planting that farm. And now I really felt the first, the first, how it was as the first beginning of a coffee producer. It was both extremely exciting to see baby coffee trees, baby geisha trees in the ground, and it was terrifying in the sense for I felt like this obligation now to make sure that these young baby coffee trees were going to prosper and develop. And that was the beginning of Finca La Mula in Panama.
Amazing. Yeah. But so when you came to Best of Panama 2004, did you already have this dream in mind that you would be a coffee producer, or was it a realization after cupping this what's been referred to as God in a cup, right? This Esmeralda geisha hitting the cupping table.
Yeah, I had developed this desire, this dream, this fantasy. I had started learning Spanish. I was doing work as a volunteer to visit farms and work with cooperatives, and I was already laying the seeds for this new career. This is usually how new ideas, new projects start. It starts with a fantasy and idea. Um, Obviously, I didn't know what to expect. Like when I decided to do this and started telling my family, my parents, my dads, I started telling them, hey, I bought close to 5 hectares, 11, 12 acres of land on a volcano in Panama, on a remote property where you can only get by hiking in on a very treacherous and tricky trail. They were looking at me, and my dad was looking at me, and he was like nodding in a way that he was acknowledging the excitement of this step, this new chapter in my life as a professional. So it was from that perspective, it was a time that was very exciting. 2004 was also a year when I first came to Ethiopia, the birthplace of countries. I discovered or helped discover the geisha from Esmeralda as being this amazing being. And 2004 set a lot of things in motion from that perspective.
Year. Giant
Year.
year. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And I question on that. I mean, for you a lot of people tried Esmeralda geisha around that table, right? I can't imagine many of those judges became coffee producers after that. I'd be curious on what do you think makes you different in your ability to take something from a dream or a fantasy and turn it into riding a mule up a mountain and starting a coffee farm? Tell me a little bit about Willem Boot in that framework.
I've never been afraid for trying out new stuff, new things. So that has always been part of my nature. I've always been fascinated by travels, by cultures. I've always been, of course, passionately intrigued by coffee, by the discovery of flavors. I remember, when now I'm talking about the first time that I tasted coffee from Panama. Now I'm talking about many, many years ago. I feel very old when I say this, but the very first time I tasted coffee from Panama, from a farm called La Florentina, and that was the first time I tasted a coffee that was truly floral in aftertaste. And I thought, wow, this is remarkable. Panama coffee. I'd never heard of it. This was a long, long, long time ago before Panama coffee was even known as a source. Panama was known for other things that were not necessarily always that great. But now there was Panama coffee, and the florality of Panama coffee as I tasted it back then as a cupper, that never left my mind. I can still remember that moment that I, for the first time, tasted this Florentina bean, and the florality of that, like roses, like a really precious bouquet of roses. That's how it smelled. So in 2004, when at the best of Panama, at the moment when I had already been working and traveling to and cupping many coffees from Panama for purchase as well. Now, when that remarkable Geisha coffee came to the table, that's it literally floored me. It was like an experience that I cannot easily forget. Yeah, and I would never want to forget it anyway.
How do you? I mean, you're judges, so you're supposed to be stoic, right? No
Yeah.
reactions, that sort of thing. What was the room like when you tasted that coffee?
So what happened is that prior to the competition, there was some buzz was going around that there was something special going to maybe presented during
Okay.
this competition. That there was a coffee that was just not just remarkable, but that was just out of the box. Fuera la caja, as they say in Spanish.
Right. Yep.
And so that word had been going around, but as a judge, and the best of Panama, we take our protocols very, very serious. As a judge, you never know what coffee you're tasting. You never know anything about the producer's name. There's just you and the cupping table and a collection of coffees with codes. And I was just quietly going through my coffees, 8 to 10 coffees, 5 cups each on the table. And then I get to this remarkable coffee where the aromas were already um, wandering around this table. And then I hit this coffee, this Esmeralda Geisha, as we found out later. And that was just the question came up in my mind. Wow, this coffee on this table, are they pulling some trick on us? Is this coffee just lost? Like, is this like an Ethiopian coffee that is slipped in and is just lost and that is just presented to us here by some level of divine intervention? Those thoughts came up in my mind, but you have to be stoic. You
Yeah.
cannot look at your neighboring table. Typically, in the best of Panama, judges have either their own table or you have two judges per table. So you cannot look at the other judge and make gestures or anything like that. And everyone was very stoic. I remember um, the room became dead quiet. Like there was this quietness that you can almost hear. And and that was partially, I think, because the judges just felt surprised, overwhelmed, flabbergasted. I can use many words for this.
So, and that truly the birth of Geisha there, and just to give everybody context, what were you mentioned the first Panama you drank? You never tried a coffee like that. Now you fast forward to this Panamanian Geisha. For context, what were the other coffees like that you were drinking at the time? What was the world drinking at the time?
Yeah, so the best coffees that the world at that point had been tasting were, of course, coffees from well-known origins or that are now well-known. I would say, Ethiopia was then already in the year 2004 was already making quite some headway because of its intricate sweetness and fruit notes and florality as well. And Kenyan coffees had already enjoyed for the longest time a lot of reputation. And then there were, other coffees from Central America, Guatemala, and El Salvador that were enjoying notoriety. In terms of the florality, just the intense floral aspects combined with the fruit notes and the lingering aftertaste, as was displayed by this geisha, that was just something very, very different. That sets that coffee, that experience apart from all of the other coffee that I had been tasting. I remember in 2003 and 2004, I was helping to lead the Nicaragua Cup of Excellence. Nicaragua was very early on in the game, but we found some remarkable coffees in those Cup of Excellence events. And here was this one coffee from the Best of Panama competition that blew by itself all of those coffees straight out of the water.
Yes.
That was how remarkable that sensation was, that experience was.
I can't even imagine. You try that coffee on the table. You have this passion and dream and fantasy, as you said, to become a coffee producer. And that coffee on the table, you finally took the leap and began the project of essentially reverse engineering that experience that you had on the cupping table. So from Finca La Mula, reverse engineering from the ground up, literally the soil. You were planting geisha trees, right? Planted the first tree. Walk us through that reverse engineering process. And I know that's a lifelong pursuit, right? But walk us through that a little bit. And then if you could touch on when Finca Sophia came into the picture, because you don't just have one farm, you've got a few now, right?
Yeah. So after that Best of Panama in 2004, for me now, every day after that event, I started now putting this fantasy into more the realm of reality by proactively planning to find land, and that led to meeting Graciano and buying the land for Finca La Mula. So that became one track by itself. And then the other track became to the idea to find the origin within origins within the origin of coffee of geisha. So that, because I thought by myself, if this geisha now is so remarkable, there must be some native geisha trees still present in Ethiopia, in the birthplace. And I started to not only read up on this, find whatever I could find about the possible origin of geisha, but serendipity was that I started in 2004. I started working proactively in Ethiopia. I became connected with first with a program that was a volunteering program for the CQI. I started to continue doing work, now being hired as a consultant for international development. And I organized every year from 2004 and on, you could say, expeditions to the far west of Ethiopia to try to find the origin of geisha.
Wow. Okay.
And that was year after year. I traveled deeper into the West, visiting the communities that carried the name, to some degree, the name of geisha. Remember, geisha is the phonetic interpretation of indigenous languages within Ethiopia. Ethiopia has had 70 plus dialects and languages, and geisha or gicha or gesha or geisha with an I, gesha without the I. These are all phonetic interpretations. So I started looking at maps that I could find, and I saw like 5 origins within the west of Ethiopia that carried part of this name geisha. And this expedition took on a life by itself. I was able to make various trips. I was able, through my international development work in Ethiopia, I was able to travel throughout the country of Ethiopia, interview farmers, interview researchers. This quest for geisha became something that was not only keeping myself busy, but also individuals like Graciano Cruz and my old friend Wilfred Lamastus, owner of Indida Estates. We were all on this pioneering train to find out more about geisha. And so in 2000, around the year of 2009, La Mula coffee trees were now gradually growing. They have had a very tough time the first 2-3 years because geisha coffee plants are very fragile. The root system is very fragile. I finally started figuring out with the help of agronomists how to treat this coffee, which is very different from, let's say, normal varieties like Typica or Caturra. And so we had started figuring out how to make these trees at La Mula grow. And then I met two remarkable human beings, Rachel Samuel and Adam Overton. They are a Ethiopian American couple. They were in the film business. Adam is a cinematographer. Rachel is an amazing photographer, and they came to Panama on their request for kind of a private course to learn about coffee farming and about the steps needed to start a farm. They had produced a documentary movie for the Ethiopian industry about geisha coffee, not about geisha, but Ethiopian coffee, but not per se about geisha. And I happened to be in this documentary, but we had never met because the recordings were done by a videographer that was working with them.
Okay.
And now for the first time, they came to Panama. We met for the first time. We hiked up to La Mula. We were all, we connected really well, and we were all very much intrigued by what was going on with geisha coffee trees at La Mula that I didn't know yet if they were going to produce or not, and became very much intrigued also by the idea to continue not only this quest for the origin of geisha in Ethiopia. Rachel is from Ethiopia. But we also now started to discuss, what would it take to start a farm in Ethiopia? And to make a long story short, Adam and Rachel asked me, "Hey, Willem, can you help us with this? Because we need some help. We don't know anything about coffee farming or production."
And you had 3 years experience, seasoned veteran at that point.
But I didn't know that much yet. I hadn't even had my first harvest yet.
Right.
So shortly after I traveled to Ethiopia, we started to really look at lands, suitable lands that was offered to them by the federal government in Ethiopia. And this is serendipity. One of the pieces of land they were offered, one of the options they were offered was very remote, not too far from the Sudanese border, at the lands that where now Geisha Village Estate is established. Yeah. And this farm, Geisha Village Estate, which is 400 plus sprawling hectares of land in the far west of Ethiopia, that became the place for Geisha Village. But also relatively close, like 2 hours drive from a very remote place where we found, as part of our quest for the origin of geisha, where we found a native coffee forest where coffee was growing, and we collected species seeds And with the permission of the Ethiopian government, we started to do research with that. And that led us to be able to do genetic research in collaboration with Denver Botanical Gardens,
Yes.
which then proved that it was very, very, very likely, with a very high level of probability, that Panama geisha was selected back in the 1930s in that same forest. And
So
so it was a
this was so this was kind of the pinnacle. It took you how many years to find, well, really the origin of geisha, almost the origin of coffee, right?
yeah, it's took me 7 years, a good 7 years to
Wow. And
find
over
that. Yeah,
unbelievable. I mean, and over that 7 years, I mean, you were traveling out very remote areas. Are you alone? Are you with a group? I mean, how do you even get to these places, and what kind of challenges did you run into as you're on this pursuit over that 7 years?
I traveled. I had a couple of expeditions where I took a group with me, a small group of individuals. Other trips, I went with Ethiopian colleagues. I really started to travel through Ethiopia. We organized also in those years, in the 2000s, competitions for Ethiopian cooperatives, and some of those cooperatives are located in beautiful places, very remote. So I started becoming a real, kind of an expert on Ethiopia as a source. And traveling in Ethiopia is beautiful. It is truly a remarkable country to visit, not just for coffee, but from a general perspective. I became also part of a program in the south of Ethiopia, in the Sidama area, where we established a school, a primary school, where over the course of 12 years, we graduated more than 2,000 children and hundreds of young women. So Ethiopia became a place where I became really emotionally, vested. And in Ethiopia, traveling, it's never without its surprises. One remarkable visit, I was with a number of international compadres who were just interested to join me on this excursion, this expedition.
Yeah.
The same people were invited by me to participate in a round table conference with the Ethiopian industry, which was going to be follow a week after. And the week before, we decided that we need to do some field trips. And I thought, I'm going to take them along on this on another expedition to the far west of Ethiopia. And we traveled to Kaffa. Kaffa is the place where coffee most likely really started in Ethiopia. The culture of Kaffa is intricately connected with the phenomenon of coffee. With still, coffee can be found in some of the giant forests near Kaffa, growing wild. And I started hearing stories about wild growing coffee trees, of different types, different morphologies, different genotypes. And I heard that in the heart of this forest, there were these remarkable coffee trees. So I decided that's where we're going. We're going
This is where the
to
adventure
visit that
takes you.
place.
Yeah.
And now we started to prepare for this trip and getting your four-wheel drive cars ready and, enough supplies. And now we got to experience firsthand how important preparation is, right? And so we travel to this forest, start to walk into the forest, with all our uh, water bottles and extra food and all of that. But what we did not take into account, that by the end of the day, when we were returning on this first day of the excursion, by the end of the day, the lions, they
Oh,
become they're typically hungry. And Ethiopia's forests, especially in the west, are still populated by many, many lions. Lions are a very normal phenomenon for folks who live in that part of Ethiopia. They have the highest respect for lions, and so we made it to this area within in the heart of this forest, where wild growing coffee trees of all types were present, and then we realized, wow, we have to get back. It's going to get dark soon, and we started walking back, and then some villagers of a small, very small settlement as we passed, they asked us, and through our translator, we could connect with them. They asked us, why are you walking here around this time? It was like 4:30 in the afternoon. And I asked,
Crazy gringo.
what do you mean? Yeah, this is the time when the lions are coming out. And they said, you'd better move fast because you cannot um, just hang out here because these lions are for real. I decided not to tell my friends about this because it would just scare them unnecessarily. But then I told them, come on, guys, we have to move fast because
Yeah.
darkness is coming and we have to get back. And I pushed them, and then I walked ahead of the group together with one other Ethiopian colleague. We were the only ones who were in on this knowledge about the lions. And then we were a little bit ahead of the others. And then through the forest, I heard this roar like this, you know, and then we thought, wow, this lion is very likely making its presence known, and it wants to make sure that we are aware of that. Something like that. Uh, of course, it freaked me out, mostly the realization that I had, because of my bad preparation, I had brought this group into this immense forest without preparing ourselves well, without being aware that this was a real risk. And that really freaked me out, to put my friend in harm's way of these fierce animals. Now, the fact that I'm sitting here and I have all my limbs is a proof that I returned safely.
Did your friends know, like once you heard the lion roar, did they? Because they didn't know, they didn't hear the translator. Did you tell them at that point, or did you just kept them moving? What do you do?
I told them when we got safely back to our lodging that was really going on. Yeah.
Oh man, and that's the last expedition you did with that group. That's
it's interesting how how far coffee explorers, coffee pioneers, whatever you call them, are willing to go for their pursuit of coffee. Because most of them they would have signed up immediately to go on another trip. It was both exciting as well as terrifying, and yeah. And so so after that expedition, I continued exploring, and then with Adam and Rachel in 2011, 2012, we had our breakthrough year to be able to really start developing the lands where Geisha village was established, was created, right? Now, Ethiopia became this big part of my life, but Panama was, of course, continuing. And La Mula had been planted in 2007, and then in 2009, two very dear friends and colleagues of mine, Alan Russell and Brooke McDonald, who are founders of Equator Coffee, Equator States Coffee, established from California. They came to me, they had heard about La Mula, about my ventures there, and they asked me, hey, are you maybe interested to do another project like this? Because if you are, then maybe you would be keen on talking with us, because we really would like to do something like that, but we don't want to do it alone. So that was the beginning of Finca Sophia.
wow. And and a question comes to mind as you tell all these stories is, you almost have this unique ability to create moments of serendipity. And I haven't heard this with many other individuals. And I don't know if you recognize that in yourself, and if you have any insight on how do you create these moments of serendipity where you meet Equator, you meet Adam, and these projects sort of evolve into these amazing ventures that pioneer coffee and move the industry forward.
Yeah, that's a good question. I, I've never, of course, I've given that possibility some thought. So the question, if you wonder, can you steer what others would um, um, consider as fate or as some predestination? Can you steer that? And so creating moments and events of serendipity. Yeah, I've always been, of course, I love to follow my heart in these types of moments and with coffee and with things outside of coffee. But I also love to connect with others on journeys like this. And so when you allow your passion to go to extreme levels where it really is becoming life-changing, and then if you're also able to connect with others who have similar pursuits of new venues in their own life, um, I think that's the remarkable difference. Because if you by yourself try to create your destiny of serendipity, you know what you are. Then you are like a Don Quixote, who is developing his own reality by himself. My father was to some degree like that. He was very much a Don Quixote. He was amazingly pioneering and innovative, and at the same time not always able to collaborate with others because he was very much in his own space. That's where the difference lies between me and my dad. I think that I have always been attracted to alliances, collaborations, because, with 1+1 is 3 where it comes to collaborations and synergy and symbiotic friendships that have also an element of work. And so that's probably my best answer. So it's part of seeking those collaborations, and the collaboration with Adam and Rachel for Geisha Village, as well as the collaboration with John and Linnell for Lawrence for Finca La Cabra, as well as the amazing collaboration with the Helen Russell, Brooke McDonough, David Paul, who is also a director at Finca Sophia for Finca Sophia, that has brought us a long way.
Yeah, and I think, that's as good as answer as any in that. It's a tough question on creating serendipity, but I really appreciate your insight on that. I might, just in our, certainly not 40-year history, but brief history together and knowing you, I will say, an addition to that creating of collaboration, you planted seeds on farms in many places all around the world. In conversations, you tend to do the same. You seem to plant seeds of ideas that might come to fruition 3 to 5 years later, but there is no focus on the economics of the deal, the pricing structure, what that might look like coming from an economic perspective. It's pure, as you say, collaboration, which makes it a much more interesting conversation. And I think people are attracted to that around you. Tell me if I'm wrong on that, if you see that differently.
Yeah, I think, you as an observer, you see other things that I would see myself when I look in the mirror. And you're, in the end of the day, you're as good as people also perceive you, right? As the impression you make on them, the sometimes, changing impact you can make on their lives. And I think you probably gave a really good wording of that. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, so Finca Sophia, we have to talk about Finca Sophia a little bit because I know that's near and dear to your heart, and that is maybe not the last farm project, but a very important one. So tell us about Finca Sophia and how that kicked
Yeah,
off
so
after this waiter coffee came to visit you.
Helen and Brooke, and we all met up, and they asked me, "Hey, are you interested in another farming project?" Initially, I had my doubts because I had my hands full
Yeah.
with the work in international coffee development, traveling. Finca La Mula was in 2008, 2009. It was really struggling still, was not, the trees were just still um, escaping infancy stage. And they hadn't really decided to grow in this amazing forest. And then in 2009, Helen, Brooke, and I, we came together, and my wife Catherine, and we decided, okay, let's do something together. Let's do a venture together. Let's try to grow coffee that is of such extraordinary quality that coffee professionals will say this is just the most prolific, most memorable coffee I've tasted. That became kind of our dream. Um, and I told Helen and Brooke, since I have been already developing La Mula, I think, developing this very different approach with Sophia, seeking the highest possible land for this, I find that I find interesting. I told them, I want to go to the peak of the mountain. I want to try to do the best possible we could do as a team, and they obviously they liked that idea as well. And then the lands we purchased for Sophia, we first heard about it in 2008. In 2009, we started developing the terrain. Now, Finca Sophia is located at an elevation of 1,900 meters, and it goes up to 2,150 meters. I consulted various Panamanian friends and other friends in who were working as producers, and they asked them, is this possible? Do you think that we could make this work? You know, one of my friends, dear friends, David Roach, who was then the executive director of the CQI, he said, and he's a great economist. He said, one of the worst thing that can happen is that the trees won't grow. That's the worst thing that can happen. So, and I said, that was kind of a grounding statement, and we, in 2009, 2010, now we had this new piece of land, Finca Sophia. The land was overgrown with weeds. It had been deforested 40, 50 years before. It had been used for cattle and for types of agriculture that really deteriorate lands. So we knew the first thing we had to do is to establish kind of an ecosystem, to reestablish an ecosystem at this very high farm. It's situated not too far from the town of Volcan, closer to the town of Cerro Punta, in a zone that is called Nueva Suiza. Sophia, the area where it is also called in Panama the desert, El Desierto, um, because of its relatively drier circumstances. And the first thing we did, we planted 15,000 shade trees. We cleaned the land, planted shade trees, wanting to establish biodiversity. And then we decided, okay, let's start planting this farm. Let's aim for the top. Let's plant 12,000 seedlings in the highest zones of the farm. And so in our ambition, in our relatively straightforward approach, we were very excited. The trees looked beautiful. It was like, it felt like they were really at home. These baby geisha trees,
Yes.
of which we had the seedlings developed in a nursery maintained by the brother of our farm manager. And 3 months go by, they look beautiful, and then suddenly there was a colder weather was coming through. At Finca Sophia, it can be very cold. The lowest temperatures we've measured are 8 degrees C, 8 degrees centigrade. cold weather came in. There was an kind of a wave of a certain fungus called Derite dieback, and within 3 months, all the trees had died. All of them, all 12,000
Oof.
coffee trees, they were gone. And we really, um, we went back to the drawing table, and then um, started to raise some money because 12,000 coffee trees. Once you have a tree planted, and once you have been caring for a tree,
Unbelievable.
it's a lot of value. And then we went back to the drawing table. We replanted. Now it is already 2012, give and take. We replanted, and in another part of the farm where there's earlier sun, uh, sunlight, where the luminosity is a bit better, where there's more protection against wind. And that second generation of Sophia geisha trees, mostly green tip geisha trees, they did much better in that remote, in the zone 3, zone 4 of the farm, where we have areas like Colibri and Estacion and a few other remarkable plots. And that gradually was able to confirm our confidence that this Finca Sophia experiments could work. You know, I'm not, I don't want to even at times remember myself to what degree, how far we went to make the farm as it is today. It was
Man.
an immense effort over those years. Just planting, you continue to replant. We did so much work in reactivating the soil, which had been deteriorated and depleted, with a lot of organic matter, doing a lot of what we call regenerative
Yep.
farming. And so establishing Finca Sophia, if you compare it to establishing any other farm, normally in coffee farms, you can expect to see a first harvest after 3 years, sometimes even earlier in some conditions, 4 years for sure. In Sophia, that all takes twice as long. It's a very slow process because at high elevations, when you plant coffee in areas where other farmers don't even go, like when we started in Sophia in Panama, my colleagues, my friends declared me for crazy that I was doing this. Some of them said, you will lose all your money and more. I don't know what the and more would entail, but you invest your heart, your soul into this. That's the and more piece. So when you plant coffee this high, cellular respiration, which is the essence of what makes us beings, plants, human beings, animals grow. Cellular respiration is at the core of how coffee trees develop.
Okay.
Through photosynthesis, you create energy, and then that energy is applied at night more than during the day. And the colder it is, the slower that process evolves, but the better the coffee fruit, the cherry, can become, and the more, I would say, multi-layered and complex flavor profiles can be: sweetness, essential oils, aromatics, and all of this. And so being up this high is both an immense challenge, but it offers great potential uptake in quality on the other end.
Yeah, there is a lot of focus in the industry on processing method and roasting. There's some on variety, right? When you look at a coffee bag, these are the things you'll see. I'd be curious on your thought or your approach to producing, ultimately Finca Sophia being the best coffee in Panama, I think in 2017, right? Is that you won best of Panama in 2017? Yeah, and then continues to do well. I'm drinking it now. It's an amazing coffee. What percentage of that cup do you believe comes from these kinds of things you're talking about? The cellular structure, varieties, the planting, the terroir, weather, those kinds of things, versus processing method versus roast profile.
Yeah. So, just a little bit before I answer that, I knew now at a certain point, I knew that we were starting to understand better how to treat the geisha tree and how
Yeah.
to do the processing. In 2014, I entered for the first time into the best of Panama. Now as a producer, we won in 2014 with Finca La Mula. We won first place with the natural geisha and fourth place
Yeah.
with the worst geisha, which was crazy. And, and as much as I can be elated at moments like that, then it draws me closer to the challenge at the other farm, Sophia, knowing, in 2014, we were really struggling at Sophia. And then we started to experiment more. And in 2017, as you mentioned, for the first time, we entered the washed geisha from Sophia, and it was just such a remarkable coffee. It immediately showed us the fundamental reason why our mission was potentially very much worthwhile, because the flavor was just so, memorable. And so when you ask me, what makes a memorable coffee, what contributes most to that? Is it the terroir, which is the big word for all of the growing conditions, including protocols and all of those? Is it just that? Is it elevation? Is it soil nutrients? Is it the unique um, luminosity at the farm? What is it? And I think first of all, we have to remember that these geishas from Panama, like from Sophia, they are, of course, they're, you can say, there are like the top athletes of an international sports event, right? And um, elevation for these top athletes of coffee, elevation is a key element.
Yes.
Although we don't always necessarily see that only the highest grown coffees win these competitions, or that they do so well. I think once you have been able to um, understand how to deal with innovation, like in the case of Sophia, then the immediate next thing becomes the question: to what degree can I provide the nutrients that the tree needs during the year, during the cycle of fruit maturation, and during the cycle that the tree is getting ready to bear fruit? And understanding how to design the ideal mix of nutrients, that's, I think, the second most important aspect. The genetics of the variety, of the geisha variety, very important, because geisha, if you treat it well, will reward you with its unique florality and unique fruit tones. Processing can absolutely play an important factor. Now we live in a time where producers sometimes bastardize the essence of their coffee by doing all kinds of fermentations with other products at times. Um, Given the fact that I call that bastardization, that also helps you understand that I'm not necessarily a big fan of that. And in the case of Sophia, processing definitely helps. It gives us the signature of the flavor profile of the coffee. Yeah. But it's elevation, it's genetics, it's the understanding of nutrients, of the applying the best possible mix of nutrients to the tree. Those are the matters that really are important.
Yeah. It's such. Yeah. Thank you for walking through that. And hey, we could talk. I could talk for hours with you, Willem. As you know, I would love to ask you one last question, just to end. What are you excited about in the future of specialty coffee? What do you feel is next for Willem or the industry that you're excited about?
So my ventures of producing these coffees, these amazing coffees, it's not just driven by my exploration of seeing and discovering my own limits of what's possible as a producer. But for me, these farms are also a laboratory because I started as a roaster and then became a consultant. I've done wonderful. I've been involved in wonderful projects as a consultant. Consultants often have in common that they can make wonderful PowerPoints and wonderful presentations, and they can put business plans together. And but not all consultants do what they preach in the real world, right?
Yeah.
And this is where I'm trying to draw the line. I'm not just a consultant. I created these farms also because this is my laboratory, man. It's like I go to cooperatives sometimes in Colombia or in Honduras, and now I can share with them from my own experience what it means to develop, 20,000 seedlings of a variety that you're excited and passionate about, and to develop some unique protocol of nutrition for that variety. And I can explain this cooperative that I work with what is required to book the commercial success for this coffee, to put it on the map with buyers. I can help them understand the importance of cupping protocols and techniques to really pinpoint the unique flavors of this coffee. So what I am excited about is to help producers, cooperatives that do not get these crazy prices as we get in Panama, that are struggling to make ends meet because they're still producing and selling their coffee in relation to the New York City, the commercial markets. So what I'm excited about to help these farmers, these cooperatives, to escape that, I would say, burden of having to produce coffees in that commercial arena where it's very hard to make ends meet as a producer. And so that's where my real passion lies, I would say. Apart from being able to drink remarkable cups of coffee that come from my own lands, that's wonderful. But the bigger picture, I find that as interesting and as important as I find my own pursuit for quality.
Wow. Well, we are very aligned there. And so just to wrap up and to end, the original story, Finca La Mula, the quest for Geisha, let's call it, Geisha Village, and the miraculous La Sophia will all be lots on auction at the World of Coffee Dubai, and in person and online in a first of its kind hybrid auction. And we look forward to representing you well there in Dubai. Willem, you are a coffee pioneer, treasure to the industry, snatched from the jaws of a lion in Ethiopia. Just appreciate you kicking us off at the cupping table in this first ever episode so much. Just thank you for your insight and your outlook, your positive outlook on the industry. We need more optimism. So thank you for being a part of that.
Thank you, David, and wish us all and my colleagues good luck at this event, this auction that will be fascinating. Buyers really need to take their time to cup these coffees and to get some of these jewels in their hands.
Absolutely. All right, Willem. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.